The Sheldon National Wildlife Rescue has set a goal: 0 wild horses and burros on the land.
News 10's Caitlin Conrad visited the refuge to see how the last of the Mustangs are being rounded up. It's a story you'll only see on News 10.
You can see the dust rise before you see the horses. As a helicopter breaks the horizon, you know a band is headed into the corrals.
I've been coming to Sheldon for a very long time. I've been here a few hundred times. This is heartbreaking for me.
Laura Lee with Wild Horse Education has been out to observe hundreds of wild horse gathers, most of them on Bureau of Land Management ranges. All of them hard to watch. The horses are driven in by air. As they reach the jute, a trained horse known as Judas will lead them into the pins and away from freedom forever.
I'm watching the very last of the Sheldon Mustangs removed. This is a part of our American history. These horses, are a living historic monument. They served with us in war, and this is the end.
The horses on the Sheldon National Wildlife Refuge have a unique history. The animals are the descendants of U.S. cavalry stock, bred on the ranges in the 20th century. Lee says this summer's gather is different than most because the goal is to zero out the Mustang and burro populations. Even during a single day of gathering, contractors make sure to get every last straggler left on the land, even if it means separating a baby from its parents. U.S. Fish and Wildlife says the reason behind the eradication is environmental damage.
At Sheldon National Wildlife Refuge, we banned grazing in the 90s, so there are no other grazers present on the refuge except for the feral horses and burros.
Public Information Officer Megan Nagel says the animals put pressure on scarce water resources and damage native species like sagebrush. Sheldon is a unique place. Established as a refuge for pronghorn antelope, the landscape is the last protected Great Basin ecosystem in the American West. For years, part of the scenery has included wild Mustangs, but by August 15th, the government is hoping to put an end to the legacy. For many, the concern has become what will happen next to the horses, especially the youngest and the most vulnerable.
Our preference is that these horses are adopted at the end of the gather, so we reach out to different members of the horse advocate community, to partner organizations, and invite folks to apply to be adoption contractors.
However, Lee and other wild horse advocates say in the past the government hasn't done enough to make sure safe homes are found for these Mustangs.
These horses go to slaughter. They're not protected by the act. And for the last 5 years, we've watched some horrific things happen here.
The piece of legislation Lee is referring to is the 1971 Wild Horse and Burro Act, which only covers animals under BLM protection. She and other advocates track horses coming off Sheldon. Lee says some of the animals die in Ford slaughterhouses. But Nagel says the U.S. Fish and Wildlife has never had a problem with adoption contractors.
There was concern over an adopter in the past, and we did an internal investigation, and we found there was no, we didn't find any problems with the contractor.
Nonetheless, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has stepped up its adoption contract process.
Some of that is an expertise in horsemanship, it's recommendations, it's an ability to provide a track record for veterinary paperwork and other paperwork. They have to commit that they will not sell any horses at auction or slaughter, and they also make sure that they screen all of their potential adopters so that they also commit to not selling the horses to slaughter.
The exact population on the range is unknown, but the feds are trying to get an estimated 450 in the next week. The refuge is in the process of being completely fenced in, and while the fate of the horses after capture is murky, one thing we do know is these are the last remaining days to see a Sheldon horse in the wild. Covering your news in denial, Caitlin Conrad, News 10.
This roundup is set to be the last. The gather is scheduled to go until August 15th.